blast off into the cosmos. Welcome to Deep Cosmos, your source for space news and global breaking updates. Subscribe if you're new. Let's dive into the video now. President Donald Trump has always believed in using tariffs to protect American jobs. A tariff is a tax on goods from another country, making foreign products more expensive and encouraging people to buy domestic. In early 2025, after returning to the White House, Trump launched a new trade war, targeting even close allies like Canada. The US and Canada have long enjoyed a close trading relationship, with goods moving freely across the border. The new tariffs aim to disrupt this, with Trump claiming Canada had an unfair advantage. He wanted to force Canada to change its trade rules and bring American factories back home. In March 2025, the US imposed a 25% tariff on many Canadian goods, steel, aluminum, and wood among them. This move shocked both countries, threatening Canadian industries and jobs. Trump argued these measures were necessary to protect American interests, even at the expense of a close ally. For Canada, the stakes were high. The US is its largest trading partner, and the tariffs threatened a major part of its economy. The Canadian government faced a tough choice: retaliate with their own tariffs or seek another solution. The situation was tense, with the future of Canada's economy hanging in the balance. Factory workers, business owners, and leaders across Canada watched anxiously. The decisions made in the coming months would shape the country's economic future. The tariffs were more than just taxes. They were a test of the long-standing friendship between the two nations. The White House hoped to weaken Canada and gain leverage in trade talks. But Canada was determined to find a way forward. The world watched as the two neighbors entered a new era of economic conflict. The outcome would have lasting consequences for both countries. The trade dispute between the US and Canada didn't erupt overnight. It began in summer 2024, when Trump promised tougher trade policies. After returning to office, he imposed sweeping tariffs, escalating tensions. Canada's vital industries were hit hard, and leaders on both sides exchanged accusations. With a deadline looming, the world watched as a stable partnership teetered on the edge of crisis. In the midst of crisis, Canada turned to Finance Minister Mark Carney, a respected figure in global finance. Most expected Canada to retaliate with tariffs or concede to US demands. But Carney had a different idea. He saw the American tariffs as an opportunity to fix a long-standing Canadian problem: internal trade barriers. For years, it was easier for a Toronto business to sell to Texas than to Quebec due to provincial rules. Carney proposed a bold initiative to liberalize Canada's internal market. The goal: break down trade barriers between provinces and create a true national free trade zone. This would make Canadian companies less dependent on the US and more resilient. Carney's plan turned external pressure into a catalyst for internal reform. Provincial leaders, facing a common threat, became more willing to cooperate. The crisis created a sense of national unity. Carney used the moment to push through reforms that had stalled for decades. The US expected Canada to weaken, but Carney's plan aimed to make it stronger from within. It was a creative response that caught the Trump administration off guard. Instead of escalating the trade war, Canada focused on building its own economic strength. The unexpected strategy set the stage for a new chapter in Canadian resilience. Canada's internal market was long divided by provincial rules and regulations. Businesses faced different standards, licenses, and packaging requirements in each province. Mark Carney's plan aimed to unify these rules, creating a single set of standards nationwide. The federal government worked with provinces to harmonize laws, especially in key sectors like agriculture, services, and skilled trades. The threat from US tariffs pushed provinces to cooperate. Agreements were reached on common standards for food, professional licenses, and transportation. These changes made it easier for businesses to operate across Canada. A business could now sell to all 38 million Canadians, not just its home province. The reforms weren't flashy, but they started to transform the economy. Canada was building a powerful domestic market. The country was becoming more united and economically self-reliant. The new internal free trade policies had a real impact on Canadian businesses. Before, small companies struggled to expand beyond their province due to complex rules. The reforms simplified paperwork and harmonized standards, opening up the entire country as a market. A furniture maker in New Brunswick could now sell coast to coast with ease. Costs dropped as businesses spent less on legal compliance and more on growth. For example, an Alberta craft brewery could now sell its beer across Western Canada without facing a maze of provincial liquor board rules. Sales increased, and new jobs were created. This story repeated across industries. The reform sparked a sense of economic patriotism. Canadians began to buy more Canadian products. The government promoted Buy Canadian campaigns, and supermarkets highlighted local goods. As American goods became pricier due to tariffs, Canadian products gained market share. This created a virtuous cycle: stronger businesses, more jobs, and less reliance on the U.S. The plan was working. Canada's economy was becoming more resilient and self-sufficient. Internal free trade was turning a crisis into an opportunity. Businesses were thriving in a newly unified market. The country was better prepared for external shocks. The reforms laid the foundation for long-term growth. While Canada strengthened its internal economy, it relied on the USMCA trade agreement as a shield against U.S. tariffs. The USMCA, signed in 2020, allowed most goods meeting its rules to cross the border tariff-free. Even as Trump announced new tariffs, USMCA-compliant products were exempt. Canadian companies rushed to ensure their goods met the agreement's requirements. For some industries, this meant overhauling supply chains and paperwork. The results were dramatic. By May 2025, 90% of Canadian exports to the U.S. entered tariff-free. The average tariff paid was just 1.9%, far below the global average. The USMCA worked as a legal fortress, protecting the core of Canada-US trade. However, this shield wasn't permanent. The agreement is up for review in 2026, and Trump has signaled he wants tougher terms. The future of tariff-free trade remains uncertain. For now, the USMCA gave Canada crucial breathing room, but everyone knew the next round of negotiations could be even tougher. The trade conflict brought unexpected twists. Trump's tariffs did hurt Canadian exports to the U.S., with only China seeing a bigger drop. Uncertainty pushed American companies to seek more stable suppliers elsewhere. Some Canadian businesses, especially those outside USMCA protection, suffered. But inside Canada, Carney's internal free trade reforms began to pay off. Interprovincial trade grew, helping offset lost U.S. sales. Canadian businesses found new markets at home. Meanwhile, U.S. companies relying on Canadian materials faced higher costs, hurting American consumers. Canada's shift inward meant it bought fewer U.S. goods, impacting American exporters. The tariffs ended up causing pain on both sides of the border. Canada's economy became more resilient and diversified. The conflict revealed the complexity of modern trade. Punishing one country often backfires. Trump's strategy was simple: use America's economic power to force Canada to give in. But Canada didn't fold. Instead, it unified and became more independent. Carney's internal reforms caught Washington off guard, blunting the impact of tariffs. Canadian businesses found new customers at home, reducing U.S. leverage. The USMCA shielded most Canadian exports, limiting the damage. The gap between Trump's threats and the actual economic impact weakened the U.S. position. Meanwhile, American businesses hurt by tariffs pressured their own government to find a solution. The image of a united Canada standing up to its neighbor earned international respect. Trump wanted a quick victory, but faced a drawn-out struggle with an unexpectedly resilient ally. The plan backfired because it underestimated Canada's ability to adapt. Canada turned a crisis into a chance for reform. The U.S. found itself facing unintended consequences at home and abroad. The trade war proved that economic power alone doesn't guarantee success. As of July 27, 2025, the U.S.-Canada trade conflict is at a crossroads. The August 1st deadline for a new agreement looms. Canada's internal reforms and the USMCA shield have made it stronger and more unified. But risks remain. Trump could target sectors not protected by the USMCA. The biggest long-term threat is the 2026 USMCA review, with Trump seeking tougher terms. The story is a lesson in economic statecraft. Even powerful countries can't always get their way through force. Canada's creative response turned external pressure into internal opportunity. The trust between the two nations has been damaged. Both countries face tough choices ahead. The U.S. must weigh the costs of protectionism. Canada must keep building independence while preparing for future negotiations. The road ahead is uncertain, requiring careful diplomacy and unity. Canada's unexpected advantage will be tested again. The world is watching to see how this North American story unfolds. The next chapter is yet to be written,